If anyone did like stepped one foot in Israel, they'd see that most of Israel is brown. But it's interesting that Israel's become the paramount of this dynamic of white colonizer, because I think it's the one place that actually destroys the paradigm of that.
Israel is shattering so many, rules, and if you think of Western societies and how they were being built, if you think about America and compare it to Israel, Israel is a country where Middle Eastern and African people were brought to be saved, to be protected, not in chains. We found it was our refuge. Israel is majority people of color by the American definition of what person of color is, and we live as equal citizens. And then the whole conversation turns into, well, we know, when we speak about this, the racial difference, we speak about Jews versus Muslims, or Jews versus Arabs, right? And that doesn't hold much to it, because the Middle East has majority Arabs, and the Middle East is an Arab empire. So, in fact, Jewish existence in this land is another win for decolonizing and land back movements around the world, because Jews have reclaimed their ancestral homeland. So the only way people were able to convince others that this argument makes sense is because they are tapping into people's prejudice about Jews. And the prejudice is that Jews are white, that Jews are powerful, that they own the banks, they own the media. And if you already has this belief system, then when you're being when a new information being introduced to you that Israel is a white country, that they control the money, that Palestinians are being oppressed, so then all of it adds up in your mind. That's how so many people on the left have been fed this propaganda, and they're actually believing it.
And I do think your identity, along with so many in the mosaic of Israel, is the wrong kind of Jew for the activists, because it shatters their narrative. It's inconvenient to it, and that it's almost a litmus test for me when someone says the Jews are the new Nazis, or they studied the Nazis' playbook. Because the interesting thing is that complicates it even more is if you come to Israel, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you've actually lived there, but the people who on average probably behave more aggressively, or in the ways that kind of get clipped and put on the internet and have more right-wing politics, are the Mizrahi Jews, right? The Ashkenazi Jews tend to veer more left-wing,
yeah,
right? So would that point to more, they're kind of carrying over a sense of retribution or vengeance for how they felt they were treated in dimitude in the Arab lands? Do you think there's a little bit of that?
Yeah, definitely. And the point that so many people think that Jews in Israel have been victimized by the Nazis, by the European Nazis, and it's not true, because majority of us in Israel, our trauma was not by the Nazis or by the Holocaust in Europe. It was by Arabs in the Middle East that collaborated with Nazis, that invited the Nazis into Iraq, where my grandmother was from. And she, during the Farhud in 1941, she saw her best friend being raped and mutilated in the streets of Iraq, a teenage girl. And she saw a mother and 9 children being killed in the streets of Baghdad just because they were Jewish. And that wasn't done by Nazis. It was actions that are very similar to the Holocaust, but this is the sort of violence that is not being discussed in Western conversation, in academia. And if it is being discussed, I read that in California a few years ago, they had a debate about how to include Mizrahim into DEI teaching, and they said we should include Mizrahim as suffering from Islamophobia, which was so bizarre to me. To reduce, they didn't want it to add us as experiencing anti-Semitism, or define our experience of hatred as anti-Semitism, which is so insane, because it is anti-Semitism, and the definition of anti-Semitism that we experience is just broader than just what they're trying to keep it. They want to say anti-Semitism is only what Jews in Europe have experienced, but that's, it's discounting our experience, it's discounting our existence, and that's something that is really important for the progressive movement and voices on the left to do, because if we exist, if Mizrahi Jews and our story exist, then it shatters everything. It shatters the the way that they're trying to identify Israel, the way that they're trying to describe Jews and describe this war, the social arguments about the makeup of Israel, the notion that Israel is a quote-unquote apartheid state. How can it be apartheid when I share the same race as Palestinians and as Arabs? We come from the same land. Majority of Israelis, over 55% of Israeli Jews are first, second, and third generation Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. So majority of us are actually Middle Eastern. So it can't be an apartheid when if the majority has the same rights as a minority. So it's none of it makes sense. And you know, I write about it in my book that while I do support a Palestinian state and I support two-state solution and I support the national rights, my dad doesn't. My dad is a big Likud supporter. He's a Tunisian man, you know, way browner than me. He looks like he is an African man. And yet all of his life he supported the right-wing coalition. My mom is Iraqi, she's also on the right. Majority of Israeli Jews from the Middle East and North Africa in Israel today are voting right-wing. And the Ashkenazi Israeli Jews are the ones that are voting left, that care about Palestinian rights. And I think the difference comes from, as my grandma told me, she said, you will never know what it's like to be neighbor with some of those people. And I don't hate her. Sorry, of course I don't hate her, but I don't hold her accountable for the statements. But I think it's coming from a place of trauma. She's been victimized by Arabs, and of course she would hold these opinions. And it's not racist because it's her race is similar to theirs. So I don't think that it comes from racism. It comes from trauma, and it's a trauma that is being continuously erased.